Hi, I'm Veronica and welcome to my channel where I show you how to become friends with your body and to regulate your nervous system so that you can live your life to the fullest. And today I would like to show you a couple of really simple movements for your ankles and feet, which are going to transform your relationship to the ground and which will affect all the neighboring joints of your body. So the feet are often quite neglected. You kind of imprison them in the shoes, and it has its consequences all the way up towards your neck. Also, often people don't really feel the ground underneath their feet and cannot really use its support properly. And so I'm sure that you're going to see the difference in the way you stand, hold yourself, in the way you walk, if you do this kind of practices more often. If you haven't done it yet, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and to hit notification button so that you don't miss any upcoming video. I have done a couple of videos on the ankles and feet already. I'll link one of these somewhere here. And as for this particular practice, you don't really need any props at all, and you just need some place to lie down. So let's get down to the ground and first move around a little bit so that you can already start feeling and sensing the relationship with the ground. So this is often a part that we miss. And it's quite important because it allows the body to do only the minimal effort. Once you know that you have that support that is there for you from underneath. So once you settle yourself, choose a position where you have your knees bent and feet on the mat, something I would refer to as constructive rest. And you can always take your time to find the most comfortable place for yourself within that shape. Even before you begin, you could pay attention to your feet and notice whether you feel your feet at all. If you don't touch them and if you're not moving them, but only through that felt sense of where those feet might be in space and maybe the contact and the feedback that they receive from the ground. So you might pay attention to whether you feel all the toes or maybe just some of them, and what would be the imprint of the feet on the ground if you immerse your feet in the ink and then place them on the white paper. So in other words, how that weight distributes over the various points on the sole of the right foot and sole of the left foot, which parts are lifted off the ground and which ones are resting. And once you've given yourself some time to feel that, we're going to begin with the movement. And it will be all done on first on only one leg so that you can really compare the sensation after working with one leg, and maybe that sensation travels all the way towards your pelvis or maybe even higher. So the movement goes on like this. You keep the front of the foot on the ground and lift your heel. It doesn't need to be a very high lift, but you want to lift it a little bit off the ground. And then you're pivoting on that front of the foot and you're moving only your heel. And the first movement will be to move that heel a little bit out without changing the position of your knee, and then lower it to the ground. You really want to have that feeling that it rested for a moment on the ground before you lift it again and bring it back to where you started. So let that heel rest, and then you lift that one heel, take it out to the side and slowly lower it, let it rest. Lift and bring it back. And you might have a look at your knee to check whether the knee doesn't sway to the right or to the left. You want to make sure that the front of the foot stays still, as if it's glued to the floor. And it's not really about making this movement as big as possible, but rather trying to find the smoothness, the ease, and later on you will notice that there is a difference depending on which direction you're going or which leg you're doing. So keep a track, this mental track of how does it feel to move this part of the foot in this particular direction. You might notice that lots of muscles are turning on and helping you with that movement. So it might be something that happens within your ankle, but it does have its effect all the way up the thigh. And after you've done a couple of movements in this direction, you're going to try it in the opposite direction. So this time you'll be lifting your heel a little bit and then lowering it towards the midline of your body, towards the midline. Then you lift it and lower. So it really doesn't matter which foot you started with, because we're gonna do both. But for now, we're doing only one leg. All of this practice is only on one leg. Lift, move it out to the side, lower. Make that micro pause when the foot rests on the ground before you lift it again and lower it to the center. And you might notice that the range of movement when you go inward is, for example, much smaller than when you go outward, or perhaps it's the opposite for you. So you're not really trying to fix anything at this stage, and there is no kind of right or wrong way of doing it. You're mostly interested in the just curious about the quality of this movement and whatever you might encounter. Now, this might feel so unfamiliar that at times you might start feeling some pain or maybe getting cramps somewhere in the foot. So if any of this happens, rather than stopping the practice altogether, see if you can, it's like a sign from your body saying like, whoa, you went way too far, too fast. It was very unfamiliar, and this kind of tension that is really cramp is like a protective measure from the body, like stop doing that to me. So then you know, okay, let's go slower, let's go much more gentle, much smaller movement, much more gentle movement. But keep on going anyway, and you will see it will pass. After you've done a couple to the inside, you can then keep your heel on the ground, lift only the front of the foot, and tap with the front of the foot. So notice, again, you're not moving the leg out, the leg stays, the knee stays. It's only that front of the foot that moves outward, and then it returns to the center. And when you lower it, you don't want that foot to be in the air. You really want all the toes to rest on the ground, and then all those toes to rest when the foot is in the center. So again, it's not some game of doing it as fast as possible. You want to go slowly enough to notice everything. Rather than looking at your foot to see what's happening, you're really inviting to create that new neural connections to map this part of the body better onto your brain. So this is an additional benefit of this kind of somatic practice. After you've done a couple to the outside, you can start going to the inside. So same thing, you tap towards the center and you return. And when you land with all 5 toes. And you can also notice as you're doing all of that, whether there's any part of the body that is trying to help you and tenses up. And especially you don't want any tension in the other leg. The other leg doesn't do anything at this stage. It can be completely relaxed. You can notice also whether there's any tension in your jaws or in the face, in your shoulders. They cannot help you with that. The movement is quite isolated to the ankle right now. All right, so we've done the heel to the sides, the front of the foot to the sides. And we're gonna go now to a movement of lifting the heel and slowly lowering it. And even as you make this movement, you can again focus on the new sensations. You might start feeling it somewhere in the front of the foot. You might feel it in the calf. And once the heel is down, you can even imagine, sorry, up. You can imagine that you have some weight attached to the heel and that heel slowly drops away towards the floor, almost as if you wanted to grow your leg longer. So it's a visualization, but it does create slightly different sensation in the leg as you're doing it. And we'll be using it later on as well. So you can already kind of start getting used to this idea. All right. So after a couple of lifts with the heel, you can also try the toes and the front of the foot. So first of all, I want to see if it's possible for you to distinguish, to have that control over all your 5 toes and lift all of those toes off the ground, but without lifting the rest of the foot. So the ball of the foot stays, it's only the toes that lift, and then you lower them. So you want to know that you can definitely distinguish and be confident about that is perfectly doable movement, that absolutely your toes can move independently, even one of the other one. All right, so once you know that you're lifting only the toes, you can also lift in the front of the foot, but keep the heel down. And then you lower first the ball of the foot and then all 5 toes. So you're doing it kind of 2 stages. First the toes, then the rest of the front, and then you lower the ball of the foot and the toes. So you're going in 2 stages, lifting the front of the foot and the toes in kind of 2 pieces, but the heel stays on the ground. And again, if you start experiencing cramp or pain, slow it down, make it more subtle, but don't give up. Unless, of course, it's completely overwhelming and very sharp, kind of sudden, piercing sensation. Okay, so we've got all of these, and let's also experience the idea of twisting the ankle. It's a very important movement. We unfortunately don't do much of it because of the very flat surfaces and the shoes, but this is what saves you ultimately from twisting your ankle in a sense of an injury. So the knee stays exactly where it is, and you're rolling onto outer edge of the foot. So if you're on the outer edge of the foot, the front of the foot on the inner part of the foot is lifted, and your big toe is lifted, but the entire outer edge stays on the ground. And then you return so that whole sole of the foot rests fully on the ground. So that is the movement, and make sure. And if you're not sure of that in terms of felt sense, rather than looking at your leg, maybe even touch your thigh or the knee to check that the leg doesn't move, that you're only making the twisting motion in the ankle. All right, and after you've done a few of these, a little break before you go to the turning inward. Now, this might be even smaller movements. Don't expect that you're going to have a huge range of movement there. You won't. It's a subtle movement, but still you will feel more pressure, more weight on the inner edge of the foot and the outer edge of the foot. The whole outer edge of the foot is lifted. So not just the little toe, but also that whole line of outer edge of the foot, as you might see right now. But the knee stays in place. It's not a movement that happens from the hip, it happens from the ankle itself. Okay. So this is the series, the whole series for one foot. And we can just give it a little break so that now you can take time to compare whether you have a better feel for that right foot, all 5 toes or left foot, whichever you started with, of that foot that you worked on, whether it seems to be resting in a different way on the ground. Maybe something changed in the way that side of the pelvis rests on the ground as compared to the other. So there might be a more awareness and feeling, that felt sense of the foot and maybe entire leg, and also some new sensations there. Now see if you can roll onto outer edge of the foot again, but this time the leg follows that movement. So also your knee will drop out to the side, and you can initiate the movement from the foot, sliding that foot away from you until it's long, until it's completely long. And then you can do the same with the other leg, just so that you check how those two legs feel when you are lying long. And again, there might be difference in sensation of how much of that leg is in contact with the ground, how that side of the pelvis rests on the ground, and so on. So give yourself a moment to notice that. And then you can bend the knees and place the feet on the ground again. And we're going to do all of that on the other side. So I will just swap sides for. Let's begin with the other leg. The first movement is lifting the heel and then tapping it out to the side and then returning to the center. So the front of the foot stays on the ground, only your heel moves by moving out to the side and then returning back to the center. And you might already feel that on one side it felt easier than on the other. Maybe here it almost feels like there is some obstacle. Sometimes you feel like you're almost overcoming some obstacle, or maybe it feels a little bit sore, whatever it is. If there's any soreness, especially any kind of sharp pain, you go much more gentle, much slower. And you might notice that if you keep going in one direction for many times, repeating it, but in a very kind of conscious and gentle way, it becomes more easeful after a while. So once you've been with this movement for some time, you can try also the movement of the heel in opposite direction, and that means towards the midline of the body, inward. The front of the foot stays and only the heel steps inward, and then it returns. So you don't rush through it. You really want to distinguish between that stage when the foot rests on the ground, it lifts, and then it rests on the ground in the new spot, and it lifts. You might be curious of all the sensations that happen within your whole leg, maybe even within your pelvis, as you create this movement. And you always watch for not doing it from the knee, it really starts from the ankle. And then you can lift, stay on the heel and pivot on the heel, lift the front of the foot, tap out, dropping all 5 toes down, and then returning to the center. So remember, the other leg doesn't do anything at that time. Now this other leg is on holiday, only one leg is working. All of this movement only on one side, tapping out and returning. You might be curious of all these little responses that happen within the entire leg, all the way to the groin, to the hip, as you create this movement. Cramping rather than stopping, see if you can slow down, make it more gentle. It often goes on its own once you start going gently. It's just a sign from your body that you're going too far, you're pushing yourself too much. That's it. All right, and then let's try the inward movement. Toes lie on the ground, you lift them, lower to the other side. It's the toes together with the front of the foot. So the whole front of the foot moves in space and the heel stays. You pivot on the heel. Every time you lower the foot, you want to feel all the 5 toes on the ground. All right. It might seem silly, but perhaps you already noticed that if you carry on with this movement long enough, it actually feels like quite a lot of work, especially if those are the muscles that you normally don't use, the kind of in amnesia. Okay, so we've done the heel out, we've done the front of the foot out to the side. Now you can lift the heel only. And imagine that you have that weight attached to the heel, and that heel is slowly dropping away, 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 until it rests with all its weight on the ground. So the heel lifts, and then it slowly, slowly drops away. You can visualize that as if there was some weight attached to it and it was pulling it down. Let it land. Let's see if you can lift only your toes, all 5 toes, and lower them. Maybe there's something that you need to work on a little bit, especially if it was a lifetime of imprisonment of your feet in tight socks, in tight shoes. I definitely recommend you going barefoot as much as possible and giving space for your toes. Okay, if you can distinguish between the toes and the rest of the foot, first lift the toes, then the ball of the foot, the heel stays, and then lower the ball of the foot and lower the toes. So you're lifting in the 2 stages and lowering in 2 stages. Toes, the rest of the front, and then foot and toes. The heel stays on the ground all the time. It's only the front of the foot lifting. And you're going in those 2 stages. So the toes go first and land last. All right. So once you've got the sideways movement, the lifting, the front and the back, there's also the twisting to the outer edge of the foot without moving your leg. Remember, it's only happening in the ankle and returning. So rolling to the outer edge of the foot, which will lift entire inner edge of the foot and returning to the center. Again, and it's fascinating to notice how very different sets of muscles turn on to help you with this movement. And also how different it might feel to turn outward as compared to inward, to do the same movement on the right side and on the left side. So you're almost like a scientist that is fascinating with exploring your own body. All right, and let's try the inner one. So for me, this movement particularly feels very restricted. It feels like I can barely do it. Like I have less command of it. It feels less accessible to me, and I'm sure you've experienced it at least with one of the movements we're doing today. It is very normal that the body is not symmetrical. So I still do it, and maybe even it makes sense to do it longer on that side that you have a little bit less of mobility and less of that kind of um, clear pathway between the brain and the centers responsible for creating the movement. All right. So then you can again roll to the outer edge, but this time also the whole leg moves out and starting from the foot. So it's almost the foot is dragging the rest of the leg. You straighten that leg until the whole leg is long on the ground. And you can do the same on the other side. And again, you give yourself that moment of a pause, observing how your legs are resting on the ground now and how much of a feeling of where the feet are in space, where the toes are in space there is now as compared to when you started. And it might be quite different. You might even experience some difference in how your pelvis is resting on the ground. Lots of things might have changed. And I always like to sneak in a little bit of a bigger movement that will combine many body parts. So let's try that. You can now start the movement with one of the feet, sliding the heel towards your hip, and then step the foot on the ground. And do the same with the other side. Slide the foot towards you and rest the foot on the ground. So let's try something called windshield wipers. That's when you have your arms out to the side, and you might know it as dropping the knees from side to side. But the challenge for today is to start this movement, initiate this movement not from the knees, but from the part of the body that feels a little bit less familiar to initiate it from, and that is from your feet and from your ankles. So if you remember that movement of rolling to outer edge of the foot and rolling to the inner edge of the foot, see if you can simultaneously roll to the outer edge of one foot and inner edge of the other foot, and then continue this movement by allowing your legs to fall to the side. And you will notice also that your pelvis responds to that, that there is some response happening all the way up in your torso. Let that all happen. If your head feels like rolling in one direction, let that happen too. If you want to return, you start from the feet. You can imagine there's some giant suction mechanism in the soles of the feet, and first those soles of the feet return and they pull with them the ankles, lower legs, the knees, the upper legs, and the pelvis, so that everything lands in the center. So you might need to slow it down quite a bit to start differentiating and starting the movement from rolling to the outer inner edge of the foot, and only then allowing the rest of the legs to drop, the pelvis to move, and maybe even the head to drop at the end of this movement. So it's the same like you might know as your regular windshield wipers, but it feels very different because the whole focus is onto that rolling from the outer edge, from the edges of the feet back to the middle of the soles of the feet. And it's even kind of difficult to speak and do it at the same time because it really does require a little bit more attention. It might look very similar from the outside, but it feels very different from the inside. And you might try that a couple of times. Again, every time you do it, it's always easier. So if you continue with it for the next 5 minutes, at the end of it, it will feel much more accessible and much more natural. I try to keep this video relatively short, so I will stop at this stage. Might be again interesting to notice how you feel after you moved the entire body and not just that isolated area. And we'll do just one little thing to end. So you can now lift one of the feet Maybe even move it slightly somewhere, move the leg slightly in the air. And whatever we're gonna do next is gonna be a very slow process. So the first thing would be to rotate the entire leg in. So you turn the leg inwards, your knee turns inwards. And then that leg goes in a super slow motion. And the first thing that is going to touch the ground will be the tip of the big toe. So notice that very moment when the tip of the big toe lands on the ground. You might get cramped if you're not used to it. But there's also that moment of, oh, there is a new point of support. Something can release inside of the pelvis at that stage. Now, the next movement is going to involve a couple of things at the same time. So I want to explain it first. You will be lowering all your toes one by one, but at the same time, imagining that you can spread that half of your pelvis very wide on the mat, as if you were spreading the butter on the toast. So you lower the big toe and then all the remaining toes, and at the same time, imagine as if you could spread your pelvis really wide on the ground. Now your heel is still up. Your knee stays pointing upward, your heel is still up. And you remember that visualization when you were dropping the weight, there was a weight attached to the heel and that weight was pulling you down, almost as if you're growing your leg a few centimeters longer. So try to do that now, the heel slowly dropping away until the entire sole of the foot lands on the ground. And just notice, give yourself a moment to notice how that foot, but also that side of the pelvis, rests on the ground as compared to the one that hasn't landed yet. And it might feel like a very different sensation. Maybe you feel like that foot needs to be a little bit more in or out. You can slightly slide it to find the perfect position for it, but without losing that kind of spreadiness sensation. And then let's go for the other leg. So you lift the foot first and then turn the leg inward. So your knee turns in, your whole leg turns in. And there's this super slow motion, a process at the end of which the tip of a big toe lands on the ground and a lot can release within the belly and pelvis at this stage. Then you're gonna use the next movement to spread all of your toes and the ball of the foot on the ground. And at the same time, spread that half of the pelvis as wide as possible on the mat. The heel is still up, the knee is pointing up, and imagine that that heel drops away, really gradually drops away from the body until that sole of the foot lands. And little adjustments you need to make and a little sliding of the feet so that you find yourself in a place where, wow, there is a very different way in which your feet and the pelvis rest on the ground. Hopefully, you can feel it. I hope that you enjoyed this practice and please let me know in the comments below what did you feel before and after, and also if you stick to it, if you do have some issues with the pelvis, with the knees, with the feet themselves or the ankles, it's really worth to do it for quite a while and then observe how does it change over time. If you currently struggle with chronic tension or pain, you can go to my website www.withmeta.eu, where there is some free resource to download. And if you would like to work with me one-to-one, you can also check my VIP health plan, and I'll link all of that in the description below. If you like the session, like it and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you next time. Bye.